Hey, Magic the Gathering players, happy holidays. It's time for us to go ahead and walk through another deck tech. Right now, with Crimson Vow out, Vampire Tribal is really all the rage, I guess, as they say. So we're just going to kind of jump on this deck and see kind of what we're doing with this. Now, this one was made by a good friend of mine, and he's also a roommate that lives with me. He went ahead and created a really good aggro Edgar deck. So I just wanted to kind of, run through what he did. I love his strategy. There's a lot of, as you can see, heavy creatures here. A few planeswalkers, a few different things. So we're just going to kind of dive into this and feel out kind of what's going on. Now, if you haven't seen this card, it's Edgar Markov. He is the commander. He has Eminence, so that means now Eminence was a more or less a mechanic that came out in 2017, the commander decks, but I do not believe that it's been a thing since. So I'm pretty sure that there was 4 commanders that came out that had Eminence, like Edgar here. But basically, whenever he's in the command zone, when you cast a vampire spell, Edgar Markov, you can create a 1/1 black vampire creature token. Now himself, if you do want to play him, he has first strike and haste. And then, of course, whenever Edgar Markov attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. So, again, super good synergy for Vampire Tribal. And, just him sitting in the command zone allows you to pop out a token whenever you play a vampire. So that's super helpful. So as you can see, a lot of vampires here. We're going to take a look at those. Now, he has gone up in price. I had no idea until I looked this up, but he's over $100 now. And I looked at him last time, he was $104 just to buy that commander. I was just blown away. I had no idea that he'd gone up that much, All right, let's go ahead and jump into some creatures here. We're just going to go ahead and check out, first of all, we got Edgar, Charmed Groom. I know, right? We got Edgar there and Edgar there. I mean, you could play them both, really, because the legend rule only applies to if it's the same card. So in this case, it's 2 different cards. Now, other vampires you control get +1/+1. When Edgar Charm Groom dies, return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Now, I would love to take the card out, but I'm kind of doing this one-handed, so I'm sure if you get this card and put it in your deck, you can kind of feel it out. Next we got is going to be Viscera Blood Arbiter. As flying and lifelink, sacrifice the creature, put X +1/+1 counters on Viscera Blood Arbiter, where X is a sacrificed creature's power. Remove all +1/+1 counters from Viscera. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each +1/+1 counter. Remove this way. So it's kind of got like a target removal built in, so you can just remove the counters and go ahead and destroy something. Kind of cool. Next we got is Elenda the Dusk Rose. She's a vampire knight with lifelink. Whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Elenda the Dusk Rose. When she dies, you can create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is Elenda's power. Super cool. Next, vampire is going to be Legion Lieutenant. Really just a vampire lore. Just gives the rest of them +1/+1. Super useful. Combat Celebrant, whenever Cruel Celebrant, whenever this card or another creature or planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Super cool. Next one's going to be Voldaren Bloodcaster. It has flying. Whenever Voldaren Bloodcaster or another non-token creature you control dies, create a blood token. Whenever you create a blood token, if you control 5 or more blood tokens, transform Voldaren Bloodcaster. Next we got is going to be Blood Vial Purveyor. It has flying and trample. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, that player creates a blood token. Whenever Blood Vial Purveyor attacks, it gets +1/+0 for each blood token defending player controls. So it's kind of interesting with the blood tokens, even though they're not playing, maybe not probably be playing like a vampire deck, you can still use the blood tokens generated as kind of a buff for this guy. It's kind of a cool idea to do that. And he's only 4 costs to get out for a 5/6, so I think that's pretty good with flying and trample. Next we got is a really I actually built a deck around this guy that was I guess it would be considered now modern. It used to be called like Type 1 or something a long time ago. But I built a deck around this guy right around 2013, actually. I had 4 of and all that stuff. But he just basically buffs your vampires. You flip your top card. If it's if it's black, of course, the other vampires you control get +1 or +2/+1 and have flying. So he's an old card, been around for a while, but he does a good job, especially in a deck like this when it's mostly all vampires. Twilight Prophet, it has Ascend. You can kind of see the description of the game mechanic right there. If you control 10 or more permanents, you can get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. Now, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the city's blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is that card's converted mana cost. So it's really super good. I mean, it gives you some, card draw, and it also does damage to your opponents. It's like really, really well put together. This one, of course, is Malachi of Blood Witch. She has flying protection from white. When Malachi of Blood Witch enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control. You gain life equal to the life lost that way. Next we got is going to be Knight of the Ebon Legion. You can pay the 1 black and 2 any. Knight of the Ebon Legion gets +3/+3 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. At the beginning of your end step, if a player lost 4 or more life this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Knight of the Ebon Legion. Super cool. Butcher of Malakir. He is flying whenever Butcher of Malakir or another creature you control is put into the graveyard from battlefield. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. Next we got is going to be Viscera Seer. This was the card that, was the first one that people found that had a... It was the 1 of 100. It was like the backwards version of it. Well, this is what the normal one looks like, I guess. Pretty basic stuff, but it's a 1-drop. You sack a creature, you can scry 1. So obviously, you're going to be making, 1/1 tokens every time you play a vampire. So if you sack a token, well, you can scry the top card of your deck. For 1 mana, that's pretty useful. Sanctum Seeker. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Indulgent Aristocrat, use lifelink. You pay 2, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. So you're going to have a token just hanging out there. So if you have this guy out, well, you pay the 2, sack a creature, you can put, add +1/+1 to all your vamps. Let's see here. We got Bloodline Keeper. You can tap it to put a 2/2 black vampire creature token with flying on the battlefield, which is really cool. Of course, you can pay to transform them. You can activate the ability only if you control 5 or more vampires. So you probably are going to have 5 vampires pretty quick with the way that this deck is set up. Lots and lots of aggro. I mean, the biggest, I guess, the idea with this deck is really just to pump out vampires and start swinging, honestly, because if a board wipe comes, you kind of got to reboot, because if it's all vampires and someone board wipes them and they don't have protection in some way, they can get removed. So you definitely want to start swinging in real quick with as many of these guys as you can. Now, Patron of the Vein. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it and put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. Next one we got is a 6-drop. Attacking vampires you control have Death Touch and Lifelink. Super useful. Whenever a vampire you control dies, you may pay 2 life if you do draw a card. So if you do get your vampires removed, you can go ahead and pay some life, and then, get some cards back in your hand so you can start recasting some vampires. Now, this little guy, he came out in Modern Horizons, I guess it was last year. Whenever Cordial Vampire or another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. So good for 2. I mean, just for 2 mana, this guy, so broken, so good. Next we got is Captivating Vampire. I used him in that same Vampire Nocturnus Vampire Tribal deck for Modern that I did easily 10 years ago. Other vampires you control get +1/+1. So he's really kind of like a lord, I guess, vampire lord. You can tap 5 untapped vampires you control to gain control of a target creature. it becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. So you can just go get someone's thing and take it from them. You can take their commander. Think about it. You can tap your vampires and go take away someone's commander and go ahead and make it a vampire on your side. Whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So useful. And that was, I believe this one was also in my old vampire deck. I made that right around the time of Innistrad. And definitely have 4 blood artists in my original modern, I guess, vampire deck. Anji, Maid of Dishonor, when Maid of Dishonor and or one or more other vampires enter the battlefield under your control, create a blood token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now you can pay 2 to sacrifice another creature or a blood token, and then each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So again, there's so much synergy here. You can kind of see where it's going, especially if you're making blood tokens with other creatures and stuff. You can kind of see how that works out. Really good. Olivia, Crimson Bride. She has Flying and Haste, of course. Whenever Olivia Crimson Bride attacks, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains when you don't control a legendary vampire, exile this creature. So obviously, you know, you're going to have a bunch of legendary vampires. So next we got is Streffen Mauer Progenitor. At the beginning of your end step, create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn. Whenever he attacks, you may sacrifice 2 blood tokens. If you do, you may put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. It gains indestructible until end of turn. What's kind of ironic about the art on this one is that I know a guy that runs a vampire masquerade that looks just like this guy. I go to a goth industrial club in Tampa called The Castle, and they have various events, and this guy looks, this picture looks kind of like a guy named Evan. So if you're ever in Tampa and you want to check out something cool, they have some really cool taboo masquerades and some really neat things there that people dress up just like vampires. So, you know, it's funny. It's funny how art and reality kind of find a convergence, especially at this place, The Castle. Really cool. All right, next we got is Vampire Socialite. She's got Menace. When Vampire Socialite enters the battlefield, if an opponent lost life this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each other vampire you control. As long as an opponent lost life this turn, each other vampire you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So again, more tribal synergy, but only 2 mana to get her out, and she's a 2/2, but she has all that on her for just 2 mana. It's so good for an uncommon. Zagras, Thief of Heartbeats. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. Flying Desert Chase. Other creature you control have Death Touch. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. So, bye-bye Super Friends. Definitely a good way to deal with people playing a lot of planeswalkers. Florian, Voldaren, Scion. It has first strike at the beginning of your post-combat main phase. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponents lost this turn. Exile 1 of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may play the exiled card this turn. All right, this is an oldie but a goodie, and this was another one that was in my old, modern vampire deck from way back in the day. Stormcurve Captain. He's basically another vampire lore, but he also gives your vampire creatures first strike, so very helpful. We've got, of course, Drana, Liberator of Malakir. Flying first strike. Whenever Drana, Liberator of Malakir deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature you control. Another vampire coming at us. It's going to be Henrika Dominathi. Flying, of course, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one that hasn't been chosen. Each player sacrifices a creature. You draw a card and you lose 1 life. Or, of course, you can transform her and, get the backside of the card. So, super cool there. I just wanted to share, of course, we got a couple of these little things here, these props. We've got Castle Dracula there. This is actually my old vampire wine. I got this, I haven't even opened it, but I got it a long time. I think it's from 2005. Wow, I didn't realize that old. But nonetheless, I've never opened it. I just kind of collected it, and because it was cool and it said vampire on it, so kind of weird like that. All right, next we got is going to be Yahenni, Undying Partisan. He has haste. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni, Undying Partisan. Sacrifice another creature. Yahenni gains indestructible until end of turn. So good. Let's pull this one here. Let's take a look at this one. We got Drana, the Last Blood Chief. Of course, whenever she attacks, defending player chooses a non-legendary creature card in your graveyard. You return that card to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. The creature is a vampire in addition to its other types. Pyleas, Trader of Get. He has lifelink. If a token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. You can go ahead and do a black and 2 to sacrifice another vampire or zombie and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Pyleas, Trader of Get. Super helpful. Again, you can see this is a lot of vampires, guys. It's really a very heavy aggro vampire synergy deck because you're just going to pump out vampires and keep stacking the effects as they're coming into play. Now, you can partner this one with Loreen, the Diversion. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain 1 life and create a blood token. Again, more blood token synergy that Crimson Vow went ahead and added to the Vampire Tribe, which is really cool. Veto, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. Of course, you can pay 2 black and 3. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. Super helpful. This guy here is Anawan, the Ruin Sage. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. Again, this was another staple from my old deck from back in the day. My my friend and roommate, he's got a good one going here, and I'm working on an Edgar Markov deck myself. It's kind of a revamp. I built it in 2017 and 2018, but now with Crimson Vow, I've been putting some new modifications into it. So you might, guys, get to see a variant appear real soon of the Edgar Markov sort of theme. We get Welcoming Vampire here. Whenever one or more other creatures of power 2 or less enter the battlefield or in control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Obviously, your vampire tokens are 1/1, so the ETB, you get to draw a card. So very useful in a commander game. Next is going to be Mavrin Fane, Dusk Apostle. Whenever one or more non-token vampires you control attack, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. Bishop of Rebirth. Whenever it attacks, you may return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can see the synergy that goes on with that. Cemetery Gatekeeper. When he enters the battlefield, exile a card from a graveyard. Whenever a player plays a land or casts a spell, if it shares the card type with the exiled card, Cemetery Gatekeeper deals 2 damage to that player. Now we got Dominating Vampire. When Dominating Vampire enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature with mana value less than or equal to the number of vampires you control until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. So, kind of, what was that? I think Traitorous Blood. What was the name of that card? Treasonous or something like. There was an old red card. You would play it, I think, for 3, if I remember correctly, and it would steal a creature for that turn. Very similar. We got Midnight Arsonist. It's a red and 3. We've got when it enters the battlefield, destroy up to X target artifacts without mana abilities, where X is the number of vampires you control. Good way to get rid of some pesky artifacts that are messing around with the board state. Whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This one's going to be Markov Enforcer. When this one or another vampire enters the battlefield or in control, Markov Enforcer fights up to 1 target creature an opponent controls. Whenever a creature dealt damage by Markov Enforcer this turn dies, create a blood token. Super good. Kind of a high CMC on that one, but, it's got a lot of stuff that it can do, so I could see why you put it in there. Scion of Opulence. Whenever Scion of Opulence or another non-token vampire you control dies, create a treasure token. You can pay a red and sacrifice 2 artifacts, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Good way to get a card in your hand. Now, there's really only one Planeswalker here. He only put in Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord. You can kind of see his +1. Target creature you control gains Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. If it's a vampire, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it for his +1 ability. His second +1 is you may sacrifice the vampire. When you do, Sword Imperious Bloodlord deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. So it's a good way to knock away. You can sacrifice just one of the tokens that Edgar makes and pretty much blow up someone's 3 or less creatures. So 3 toughness or less. So really good thing. Oh, and his last ability, you may put a vampire creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. So you can -3 him and just pop out a vampire onto the battlefield. Good way to kind of ramp out vampires super fast. I like what he did here. It's good play. We have 1 enchantment. It's Shared Animosity. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So obviously, all vampires, you get the idea. Super easy. Next, we're going to go ahead and look at this here sorcery. It's basically kind of like a board wipe for your opponents, but it keeps, says each non-vampire creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of vampires you control. So it's a one-sided board wipe. So, you basically kind of like a Cyclonic Rift in black if you run a vampire. So super helpful. Next one we're going to look at is Ruinous Ultimatum. Obviously, it's another, kind of like a Cyclonic Rift, but it's in the Edgar colors. So definitely worth using. Now we're done with that stuff. Let's take a look at some of these artifacts, see what he's got. We're going to take a look at Glass Caster. Again, this is a new card that came out in the Commander deck for the Crimson Vow set. Whenever 1 or more vampires you control attack, create a blood token. You can pay a black and tap and pay 1 life. You create a 1/1 white and black vampire creature token with lifelink. You pay 2 black and tap. You can sacrifice it and 13 blood tokens. Each opponent loses 13 life and you gain 13 life. Wow, that could be a game winner if all the players are below, 13 life, if you can pull that off. Vanquisher's Banner, very tribal heavy. Creatures control of the chosen type get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell of the chosen type, you can draw a card. So obviously you're going to want to put that and get some card draws. Throne of the God Pharaoh is a card I use in a lot of my own decks as well. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. It's so broken. For 2 mana, like you want to put this in every single aggro deck because it's just so good. Skull Clamp, not a lot of explanation here. The idea behind using Skull Clamp, is that you basically, those 1/1 tokens that Edgar makes, you attach Skull Clamp to them to get card draw. You can just go boom, 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 and just start drawing 2 cards. So good. I mean, that's so much good synergy. Herald's Horn, again, tribal buffs. Creature spells you cast the chosen type are 1 less to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top card of your library. If it is a creature card of the chosen type, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. Super good. Soul Ring, I'm not going to explain that. Talisman of Indulgence, it's a mana rock that allows you to tap for the 2 and you take a damage. So you get the, the blue or the black or the red, and you can take a damage and get some stuff. If you've never seen a Talisman before, if this is the first time you've ever, built this type of deck. Again, Talisman of Hierarchy, same idea. Either or mana. And of course, Talisman of Conviction, either or mana. Rakdos Signet, yeah, you pay anything, you get 2 of those, black and a red. You use anything to get a black and a white, or I'm sorry, a red and a white, apologies. And of course, this one's a black and a white, of course, same idea as the other ones. And last but not least, of course, on our mana rocks would be Arcane Signet. So if you're new to Commander, putting a lot of mana rocks in your deck is a good way to ramp and allow you to get to your mana a little bit faster early game. Now, we're going to look at some of the non-basics, and that should wrap it up. Of course, we've got this new one from Crimson Vow, Sundown Pass. You can see what it does. Next we're going to look at is going to be Clifftop Retreat. It's one of the lands, of course, that enters the battlefield tapped. Let's control a mountain or plain. So, got to have a mountain or plains out so it comes into play on tap. Battlefield Forge, you take a damage, you get your 2 mana, or you get 1 of each of those 2 colors. So 1 of each of those. Or you can not take damage and just take the colorless, either way. Great card. One of these commander dual lands. I mean, you don't have to pay $500 for a dual land, $1,000. Just pay that. If you're playing commander, a lot cheaper than going after revised dual lands. Sacred Foundry. It's just a shock land. You take 2 damage. You can draw either color. We've got a obviously a fetch land. You'll get some. Now, what's kind of cool about fetch lands is that if you don't know this already, it doesn't have to get a basic land. It can get, as long as it says mountain or plains on it. Like right here, you've got this Sacred Foundry. Even though it's a shock land, it's a non-basic. But it says mountain plains on it, so you can use Arid Mesa to go get this land. So you still will get the opportunity to be able to tap for the 2 different colors of mana just by using an Arid Mesa. So that's why the fetch lands are so valuable and so useful. And they synergize really well with certain land types. Rugged Prairie, it's just what's called a filter land. You know, you pay one of the 2 colors and you get the other 2. It's really useful. Fetid Heat, same idea. It's another filter land just like the last one. I got another filter land. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. This is just another tap and take damage land. You know, but you get either or color, so very useful. We got Shattered Sanctum. Again, these are just printed in Crimson Vow, so make sure you get your hands on some of those. Isolated Chapel. You can see what it does. Pretty basic stuff. Godless Shrine, another shock land. Take 2 damage. But again, of course, it's searchable. If you're looking for a plains, you can go get that. So, you know, if you want to go ahead and search it with a fetch land. Vault of Champions. You can see what it does. Again, this is another commander land. Comes into play untapped because if you have more than one opponent. Marsh Flats. Marsh Flats, of course, it's a fetch land. We know what it does. Blood Crypt, another shock land, of course. Luxury Suite came out in Battle Bond, but of course works great in all commander decks. Bloodstained Mire, another fetch land. Sorry about the glare, guys. Next is going to be, we're going to look at Sulphurous Springs. Another take 1 damage and get either color of mana. We'll take a look at Dragon Skull Summit. We got a Haunted Ridge. You can see that. And the last of these types of lands, these dual lands, would be Graven Cairns. Again, it's another filter land, so super, super good stuff. Now, we're just going to take a look at the last of the synergistic lands that go with this deck. These are more than 2 colors, so it'd be like 3 or more colors. We got Voldaren Estate. This came out in Crimson Vow. It's obviously designed to go right into a vampire deck. So, yeah, this is definitely the card you want to put in there. You can pay 1 life, add 1 color of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a vampire spell. If you want to pay the 5, tap it and create a blood token. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each vampire control. So if you want to start creating blood tokens, you can use the land to manufacture some blood tokens, which is really super cool. Next we're going to look at is going to be City of Brass. It rhymes with another word that came out in an old set, which I won't say on a YouTube video because I want to keep it PG. But nonetheless, you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but it deals damage to you. Mana Confluence, this is a good one. I mean, you pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It's basically the same as City of Brass, just, you know, a little bit more newer card. Unclaimed Territory, you add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. So it's going to be vampires, obviously. Reading Pool, or actually, no, I'm sorry, Reflecting Pool. It's going to allow you to go ahead and add to your mana pool 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. So it just, you know, gets you more multicolor mana. Next is going to be a Command Tower, Reckoning, and Command Tower. We've got some, looks like Path to Ancestry going on. Yeah, definitely if you're going to make a tribal deck like this, you have to have Cavern of Souls. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that, you know, obviously when you tap it, you can spend that mana to cast a creature spell of the chosen type, and it can't be countered. So your vampires, the blue player, the counter player, and the control player can't really just punt your cards as you're trying to cast them. So good. Next we got is Svyelun Triumph. Obviously gives you the 3 different colors of mana that Edgar Markov is built around. And last but not least, we got an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other types. Guys, that does it for the Edgar Markov deck. Thank you for watching my video here of this deck. Like I said, my friend Corey made this. He did an excellent job, I gotta admit. He really put a lot of work into this. He's been working on it for a very long time. You know, and I hope you guys enjoy playing vampires and all these cool gothic themed things just like I do. Please guys like and subscribe my channel. Leave me some comments about this deck, any ways you think that my roommate could improve it, or any ways that you've made your deck a little different. I really love reading those kind of comments. It really helps me build better decks, helps him build better decks. We really appreciate these kind of things. And, you know, until next time, guys, the Night Phoenix shall soar again. Bye now.